Thank you, Victoria. Has anyone ever went on a business trip and met with a client from a different culture for the first time? Do you remember being nervous walking into the office because you were unsure of exactly what to expect? I know I have many times, but most recently I met with colleagues in Japan, and boy was I not prepared. Hello, my name is Michael Sancilio, and I will be talking about Japanese business customs with the goal of making you more informed than I was last year. My job has afforded me the opportunity to work very closely with a team in Japan, which has exposed me to the very specific and interesting business customs Japanese people follow. The Japanese word you see on the slide is kata, which essentially means the way of doing something. And in Japan, there are very specific protocols on how one should act in a business setting. While we can certainly spend hours discussing this topic, I have focused my presentation on two circumstances that you would undoubtedly find yourself should you have the opportunity to do business in Japan. The first is related to personal introductions, particularly what is expected when meeting a Japanese colleague for the first time. The second is focused on meetings and how one should act within this type of setting. I am confident this approach will provide you a solid understanding of some of the most recognized business customs in Japan. In every culture, there are certain behaviors individuals follow when being introduced or working with a business colleague or client for the first time. Japan is certainly not the exception. There are two customs in particular that all business travelers to Japan should be familiar with: gift giving and business card exchanging. In Japan, it is extremely common for colleagues to exchange presents. Therefore, when meeting a Japanese colleague for the first time, you will likely receive a gift, and you should be prepared to reciprocate the gesture. The emphasis is not on the gift per se, but rather the ritual around the presentation of the gift. In fact, a common phrase spoken prior to presenting a gift is sumaranai mon, which translates to uninteresting or dull thing. The point here is to suggest that the relationship is more important than this inconsequential object. There are a few do's and don'ts one should consider when preparing a gift or when receiving one. The most important do is that the gift must be wrapped. As noted earlier, the emphasis isn't necessarily on the gift, but the physical presentation is valued, and proper wrapping will portray thought and consideration went into this. Additionally, it is proper to exchange gifts using both hands. This is a common custom in Japan that exemplifies respect and will come up again in the next section. Of course, there are some don'ts as well, including the picture that you see on the slide, which is to never give lilies or white flowers, as they generally are associated with funerals. Also, avoid giving gifts in multiples of 9, as that number is considered very unlucky. The second custom associated with introductions is the presentation of the business card. It is said, without a business card in Japan, you will be a flop. Much like the art of gift giving, there are specific protocols that must be adhered to when exchanging business cards in Japan. In America, business cards are generally viewed as solely utilitarian, the means to obtain contact information. In Japan, this is not the case. Here, business cards are treated as the paper embodiment of the individual and should be handled in such a manner. For example, they must be kept in a perfect condition and transported in some type of card holder. As was the case with gifts, when presenting or receiving one, it should be done with both hands. If you're in a conference room, the card should be placed in front of you in the order coinciding with the order of the individuals seated at the table, where they will remain until the end of the meeting, at which point they will then be placed in your card holder. At no point should you play with or write on the business cards during the meeting, as this is a sign of disrespect to the individual whose card you are handling. In addition to the presentation of the card, it should be noted that the card itself should be of high quality paper, contain your title, and of course include your contact information. Finally, while utilizing a bilingual business card is always preferred, it is definitely not expected. Next, we will turn our discussion to customs associated with business meetings. Specifically, I'm going to distinguish between meetings held in an office setting and meetings held in a more social setting, possibly over a meal or drinks. As has been a theme of this presentation, There are very specific protocols associated with business meetings. The first is related to seating. The seating assignments will be determined by the status of the participants of the meeting, with the highest ranking person seated at the head of the table. The higher the status, the closer your seat will be to the head. The highest ranking individual will also be responsible to commence many of the actions of the meeting. For instance, it is customary to remain standing until this individual is seated, or if beverages are served, you should take your lead from them. Over the course of a business meeting, it is absolutely appropriate to take notes. However, be mindful, never write someone's name in red ink, as names in Japan on graves are red. One last item I wanted to mention about business meetings in Japan is that it is not uncommon to see eyes closed during a meeting, much like the image you see before you. No, these men are not sleeping, but rather they are listening intently, and this is a very acceptable action during a business meeting. Of course, not all group business interactions occur in a meeting held in a conference room. This brings me to my favorite part of Japanese business customs, socializing. For Japanese, socializing is central to business and acts as a natural extension of a normal workday. It is the way relationships are developed, enhanced, and cemented. Unlike America, however, it is unlikely for any business to be discussed over in such a setting. Instead, conversations will focus on more personal matters, like family, hobbies, recent vacations, etc. Unquestionably, any discussion about socializing customs in Japan will focus on eating and drinking, and unfortunately, there are way too many to dive into in this context. However, I would like to mention one custom I was made aware of before my first visit with my Japanese colleagues. This proved quite helpful. You see, the Japanese love to drink alcohol, and you should be prepared to do so even at a business event. But please keep in mind, when a glass is empty, it is assumed you want more, and your colleagues will continue to refill your glass. Therefore, if you've had enough and would like to avoid a hangover the next day, be sure to leave a few drops in your cup. As you can tell, there are many customs that one may be aware of when doing business in Japan. Please see the list of sources utilized for this presentation if you wish to gather in additional information. Before I hand off the presentation to Marissa, I'd like to leave you with a few key takeaways. 1. One should always be prepared to give or receive gifts, and make sure they are wrapped. 2. Always carry a business card, and be mindful of how you handle the cards you receive. 3. Be aware of the hierarchy of the individuals you are meeting with, and follow their lead in seating. 4. Don't be alarmed if meeting participants close their eyes while you are speaking. This is natural. They are listening to you. 5. Be prepared to continue the workday over dinner or drinks. And finally, number 6, know when you've had enough to drink, but make sure you leave a few drops in your glass. As I noted earlier, there are certainly a number of Japanese business customs that were not going to be addressed in this presentation. But I hope the topics I focused on provide you with a solid foundation should you be presented with the amazing opportunity to work in Japan. Good luck.